am I a radio DJ? Now it's like, coming up next. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, I never know kind of what to say, you know. Hey, do you like that one? Well, you're going to love this.
Okay, welcome everybody to episode 2 of Holy Fuck, It's a Music podcast. I'm Kevin Brown, one of your hosts, and my other co-host is Mr. Randy Woods, who you can see with the light shining slightly above his head there. We're here with talking to Kris Klyne of Morally Sound, Firing at the Sky, and solo performance fame. Thanks for joining us tonight, Kris. So I just wanted to start with a few sort of groundwork questions, and just to give the people a sense of who you are. Where did you grow up? Were you born in Saskatoon, or?
I was actually born in Edmonton. I lived there for the first 2 years of my life, and then I've been in Saskatoon ever since.
And so, what were your early influences? What was music like in the Klyne household growing up?
It started out a lot with the Beatles, and rating my brother's records, right? So Rush, Supertramp, Kiss. That kind of stuff, right? And graduated to a lot of Beatles with my dad's album collection I went to. He had every old school Beatles album that you could possibly think of, like every release, the day that it came out, he owned it, right? So all those originals made them onto my tape deck and recorded, and then I just, played the hell out of those day in and day out. That's kind of how I got an affinity for learning first harmony vocals. My dad played doing country music and old school rock for a lot of years, so he kind of pushed me to learn to be the harmony guy and play bass guitar for the longest time. So I started out on that in grade 6, playing bass and a little bit of drums and just kind of singing backup vocals. So,
what did your dad? What did he do? Did he play guitar and sing, or?
Yeah, so he used to do a one-man band thing back in the day. First he actually grew up in the Randy Bachman era in Winnipeg. So he played in several bands that played the same circuit as Randy and the Guess Who. So he basically he knew Randy really well, and back in those days. So he'll still, when Randy would come through here and play shows, he would pop out to the club, where Randy was playing and say hi and watch him do his thing. And so he knew it from way back when. And he said back in the day, live music was absolutely insane. Like there was a bar on there was 16 bars on one street kind of thing. And each one would be lined up around the block all night long to get in to see people. You'd pay a big cover charge to get in, and it would be all day, every day. So he said, I used to play 365 days a year, he said.
Was this was that in Winnipeg you're referring to?
That was in Winnipeg, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say even in the 90s and the 2000s when I played there, Winnipeg had a great music scene with tons of places to play.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same here. I played in the 90s and 2000s there too, and it was unreal. It's still a great place to go for live music for sure. So that's kind of where I started out. Was he pushed me to learn how to play bass guitar, sing, backup stuff, and so I started playing in a country and old time rock band with him when I was 10, 11, I guess it would have been. Just kind of started out and playing, the Elks Club and the Army and Navy and all the legions in town and hall gigs and all that kind of stuff. When I was still teenager to make extra money, right?
And so with your older brother being a more sort of touring musician or session musician who played with a lot of people, how did that sort of trickle down to you? Did you sort of use him as a sounding board and learn new things from him, or what was the relationship like in that regard?
Well, it was kind of a weird one because he moved out of the house when he was 18. So, and we have about a 6-year gap. So he wasn't around. Okay. He wasn't around a ton, like when we were small, of course. But he was out of the house by the time I was just kind of starting to play. So, I mean, of course, I respected a ton of the stuff that he was doing musically because he was playing in original bands, cover bands, jazz trios, things like that in town here a lot when he was here. And I even went in my I think I was in grade 7. I went and saw him play at Carolyn Robbins in Saskatoon. He was in a Kiss tribute band with like the full makeup and everything. And I remember my mom taking me to watch him play on a flatbed trailer outside of the school with the dry ice and the explosion bangs and everything out in a big field. So yeah, I used to kind of, I'd give him a phone call and ask him questions about stuff. And whenever he would come through town playing in whatever group he was playing in, I'd, find a way to get into that bar and see him play. So that was kind of his influence on me.
When did you switch from sort of 4 strings to 6? Like, when did you decide that you were going to start playing a little bit of lead, or?
In grade 8, I kind of tickled with it a little bit. So like I took a guitar class in grade 8, but it wasn't until kind of grade 9 where I had my own guitar at home and practiced a lot and tried to kind of figure things out. But so grade 9 was kind of that first year. Grade 10 was when I joined a lot of the concert band, jazz band, Dixieland band, all that kind of stuff in high school, and did both bass and guitar, and then started my own kind of little bands here and there when I was in grade 10, grade 11, grade 12.
And so what was the progression then into, because obviously, starting life as a bass player in a country band is very different to where you ended up when you were writing your own music. How did you sort of get into that heavier stuff, the metal? What was the impetus and who were the sort of the bands that drove you into that style of music?
Well, that's kind of the weird thing, because I was very eclectic with my music style. So obviously jazz, country, rock, hard rock, right, from my brother's influence. But I started getting into a lot of really heavier metal bands. So it started in grade 9. A friend of mine, lent me a few cassette tapes, right? So AC/DC, Metallica, things like that, right? Started listening to Iron Maiden, and really started to get into that kind of music. And by grade 10, I was full on into, Slayer and Creator and all that kind of stuff, right? Like the really heavy thrash bands. And then in grade 11 and 12, I was really into a lot of death metal and progressive stuff. So I was still playing country music, doing all that, yet having the full long hair and full on as heavy a music as possible. So, I was all over the map. From and then again, like I said, in concert band, in jazz band, in Dixieland band. So I was playing, 5 different genres of music all at the same time.
Hey, Kris, I saw you play at the Wash and Slosh once years ago with Morley Sound. And I think I saw you another time somewhere else too. I just don't remember. Now, I think maybe we knew who each other was, but we didn't really know each other well or anything. So I don't really know too much about Morley Sound, except I'd worked with a guy that was a big fan. So did you guys tour quite a bit? Did you guys tour across Canada, or was it just like Western Canada, or? Yeah.
No, we toured across Canada for about 3 years, back and forth, right? So in 99, we put out our first album. So we were a band in 98. I was writing, putting some stuff together. The guys, graduated to playing a lot of shows. We were doing the Sutherland and Riley's and all that kind of stuff. You remember the circuit. And then, and then from there in 2000 is kind of when we started to really branch out. So we would play the festivals, the Shake in the Lake in Minnedosa and Rock in the Valley and Craven and all that stuff. And so in between, we would carry that through in our tour, right? So we would stop in Minnedosa and then we'd carry into Winnipeg and then we'd keep moving our way east, and then find our way back, and I would find maybe I'd be home for a month, 6 weeks, and then right back. Heading west into all the way to BC and back. And we did that back and forth for about 3 years. Until 2000, right. Did that until 2004 technically, but 2004 was kind of a splintered year.
Did you? It seems to me too. You might have had a few different guys in the band. Was it how much did your lineup change? Because you were always just a 3-piece. Is that right?
Yeah. It was always a 3-piece. Just we had a bass player rotation. That was kind of our thing. So we always had me and Armin. We're all on the same page for the most part on what we wanted to do, how we wanted to do it, where we wanted to go with it, right? Bass players was a tough thing because we had Ash Cameron first. He was our first guy, life of the party, funnest guy ever, really great guy. But he was older than us, significantly older than us, and I don't think he ever looked at being in a band as anything more than a reason to party and have fun. So touring was really tough for him. We wanted to tour. He didn't want to tour because he didn't want to give up his job. He didn't want to, he didn't want to segue into that lifestyle. He just had too many responsibilities and money that needed to come in. So we fought with him kind of, and it seemed like he kind of self-sabotaged his role in the band, specifically because he didn't want us to carry on without him, but he also didn't want us to, he didn't want to quit the band either, right? So he was kind of hoping we would stay pat, just be those guys that would keep partying and having fun. And we had bigger eyes to the end game. So eventually, we just kind of had to part ways with him and move into trying to be able to tour. So we picked up our second guy, Jesse. Jesse joined us. Well, we actually had two Jessies. So we picked up a guy that, a first Jesse that kind of, he filled in, played a couple of quick shows with us on some dates we had out of town. And then while the second Jesse learned the songs real quick, and then, we wanted somebody that could sing as well, that could, fill in backgrounds and things like that. And so, so the second Jesse kind of fit the bill. So we brought him out, and so we also did a cover project at the same time too, so that we could make some extra money while we were out on the road too, so we could fill in any gaps wherever it's smaller towns, right? Because the smaller towns, you weren't playing metal. You weren't playing metal shows in Sudbury we used to play in some of the tiniest places like Thompson, Manitoba was tiny back then. Morden, Manitoba.
One other quick thing with Morley Sound. So how many albums did you guys end up putting out?
Put out two
Just
albums.
The two.
So in '99 we put out the first one. Tried to get out on the road as much as possible, but had the split with Ash, brought in the new guy. And by the time we were ready to go in physically to the studio and record that second album, we basically went in and recorded with him, and then he quit. So he basically quit. So we hired another guy to come in. Andy Dolan came in. And so we brought him back into the studio to re-record all the bass tracks because we wanted him to feel like he was part of the actual project and be invested in it. So we brought him back in. So we recorded in White Rock, BC at Turtle Recording, right on the ocean. Okay. Beautiful recording experience. And brought him down and he laid down his own tracks and then we went back out on the road, touring from there, right? So that was when our second album came out was 2001, 2002. And then we spent the next couple of years touring and pushing that. But then Andy moved on in 2003. And then we brought in another guy, Shane, in 2004. And that was kind of when we kind of started to wind down and pack it in. Armin wanted to kind of create his own life. He had gotten married and wanted to kind of find a career path and all that. So once he packed it in, it was kind of the end of it for me. Working with anybody but him is just not he's not replaceable as far as the band was concerned.
And so you have, I know quite a lot of people in town, and the ones who are my friends who listen to metal and are sort of familiar with the local metal scene. Morley Sound were a big name, man. Like, you get a lot of love. Like, a lot of people love that band, and you still have quite a few hardcore fans who still want you to be playing that Morley Sound stuff. Even, on the live cast you did last night on Facebook, you still see that in the comments that people are still asking for Morley Sound. Like you said, they don't care. So do you still enjoy playing that stuff, and where does that fit in your evolution as a sort of a songwriting performer? Do you really look back with fondness on those days and those songs?
Oh, absolutely. If I could, I would still be doing it, even if it was just a reunion show every year, twice a year. That would be a blast. I actually just did at the end of last year in, I want to say it was March. I actually got together with Rich that was in Firing at the Sky with me, and Zach as well was in Firing at the Sky, and then we brought in a bass player session guy and my good friend Justin Bender from Third Eye on Into Eternity. He played guitar, and we did basically a reunion show, if you will. It wasn't Morley Sound reunion. It was more of, there were a lot of old school Morley Sound fans that wanted to see us play again. It was a 40th birthday party for a couple that we know that were they met at a Morley Sound show and had been together ever since. And so they asked if we could come down to Moose Jaw and put together kind of a couple of sets of heavier songs and put some Morley Sound songs in the set. And so I got those guys learning tunes, and we pulled it together, like I said, last year. So that was kind of a blast. But yeah, I would keep doing that for sure. I mean, if I thought I could do it justice, I would do it every year, at least once or twice a year, and just keep those kind of songs alive, because I know there's so many people that really connect with those old school days, and those were some great times for them. It was great times for us. So it'd be great to be able to relive all that every so often, you know.
Before you sort of, you transitioned into a little bit, I'd call it more, obviously rock. Firing at the Sky is more of a hard rock band than metal. But you also had another project, The Divided. So I just wanted to talk about, I don't know what the genesis of that was and how that was born, because I know that was a hell of a project, right? It was a double album, one side really heavy, one side sort of lighter. What was the inspiration for that recording?
Well, it's quite an interesting one. So the guitar player that I worked with significantly was Darren Rowett. He was a big Morley Sound fan back in the day. He actually auditioned. We were looking at putting in a second guitar player. Darren actually came and auditioned, and we would have hired him to come on, but it just felt like it didn't work musically, like Morley Sound didn't work as a four-piece. He's a fantastic guitar player, great singer, really good writer, great energy guy, and he would have fit great in a band dynamic, but in the Morley Sound dynamic, it didn't really quite fit. It just kind of, I don't know, there was just something about being a three-piece that just made sense for the band. And so when Morley Sound packed it in 2004, I kind of started doing some writing, so my daughter was born, and I was kind of transitioning into doing a lot of acoustic writing, right? So I did some acoustic writing, and it's come up with a lot of the songs that the Divided acoustic side on the album came out with. And so then I kind of called up Darren. I said, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but I kind of wrote these songs. I'm curious if you maybe want to take a stab at it. And at first my idea was just to have us as a duo, just me and him, and go play some shows, and just, I would play lead and sing, and he would play rhythm and do some singing, and just kind of mix it up. And then once he came on board, he's like, well, why don't we do this as a full band? Like, what's stopping us? And I said, well, nothing really. It just, my initial idea was a two-piece. So he said, I got a buddy, Kalen. He's one of my best friends, plays bass. What do you think? I said, sure, let's try him out. And then we kind of linked up with Cody Johnson as well. He used to play in a band called Loose Disciples, and added him into it and just started jamming just to see how it would go. And it went fantastic. Like, the sound that we were kind of pulling together was really great. And so we kind of started, I had a couple of songs that were meant to be old Morley Sound songs, that are on that heavy album. And so basically I brought those into the fold and said, well, if we're doing acoustic and now we got a four-piece band, well, maybe we put together a heavy version too. And so then we started writing together. I penned some songs, brought it to them. They started reworking it, pulling some stuff together, and we started doing the heavier stuff as well. So it just kind of morphed into a full project that was never really intended to be that way. And so then once we got going, it just kind of kept snowballing. We then went in and recorded and started playing a lot of shows and opened for Catatonia and Regina. And it was a blast. It was absolutely fantastic. And they're like the best guys ever, musically and personality wise, like so easy to work with, such great ideas. So it was a lot of fun, but unfortunately, all three of those guys all got jobs on the rail. And so when they started working for CN, they were all on opposite schedules, so they could never be off at the same time. So we could never book shows or do touring or any of that kind of stuff, because there was always going to be somebody that would have to work. And so they basically have to use their holidays to go out and do a show here. Even to do a Saskatoon show, you'd have to use a holiday day just to do a Saskatoon show. So it didn't make a lot of sense.
And so when did that transition happen into when did you put together Firing at the Sky as a project? And like I said, that was a pretty distinct shift in tone from what you'd done previously, because it's got some really heavy stuff in there, but it's not, I really wouldn't call it metal. It's hard rock, it's Audio Slave, it's that kind of Foo Fighters, it's that kind of level. So what was that? Why did you go that way? What was your sort of thought process behind taking that turn?
Well, it's got some metal leanings, but it's definitely got more of I guess you would say, a Foo Fighters meets Tool kind of quality to it, right? Where it's heavy, but it's melodic, and it's still got more of a rock drive to it. For me, that kind of came along. I started after the Divided folded. I had been working with the drummer for a while. He'd actually did some jamming with me back after Morley Sound packed it in. We jammed a couple of times and started kind of penning some stuff. And then he kind of lived in the same town as me in Martinsville. So I started writing some tunes and just say, hey, what do you think of these songs? So I sent them to him, and he said, yeah, I really like what I'm hearing. I said, well, how about you just try putting some drums to it, see how it kind of turns out. He did, and we both liked what we heard, and so him and I just started. I used to go over to his place and just kind of start recording, just little demos with him of all these songs in his basement. And then once we kind of progressed, we had about 5 songs together. We were like, well, I guess we should find a guitar player and a bass player and really put this into an actual band. So we got called up Rich and asked if he wanted to join and play lead. He was kind of the guy that I felt could kind of have the whole package. He can sing, he can play, he's got a good energy, and he kind of fits the bill. And then we looked for bass players, kind of bounced around a few guys until we finally landed on Colton Schultz and brought him in. And so then we just kind of started learning songs and practicing, basically 3 times a week, kind of pulling those songs together. So as far as the writing was concerned, I just wanted to take a stab at seeing what I could actually do that would be a little bit lighter. I'd never really attempted to write anything that wasn't lighter than Morley Sound. I had taken a stab at writing the acoustic stuff for the Divided. So it was like, well, let's see, let's try to do a heavier version, but mellower, and see what kind of comes out. It's just kind of a testing my boundaries, if you will, right?
Yeah. Well, there's this, like you said, I mean, they've still got, songs like By Force, that's a pretty heavy track, but then something like The Purpose, it's got much more of a bounce to it, and, it becomes really, really radio friendly. And I always thought that where, you balance that really well, where you've got the sort of the crunch and the grunge for the fans of Morley Sound can listen to Firing at the Sky and enjoy it, but then you've also got that kind of more broad appeal, and I never really caught the edge that I thought it should have done. And I remember when you opened for Age of Electric at the Coors Event Center, that set was just phenomenal. And the whole place, the people who were there to listen to it really, really enjoyed that set. But it didn't, I don't know why that didn't sort of give you that break that you maybe guys needed to get a little bit more radio play. Well, there's Randy's holding up the Firing at the Sky CD. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? What were your thoughts around knowing that you have this strong bank of songs, a tight band who can deliver those songs really, really well, and yet still not quite being able to break into that sort of mainstream?
Yeah, I was hoping that it would take off for sure. I mean, at least get some local energy, and I don't know. Part of it though seems like here in Saskatoon that the music scene at the time that we came out, the live music scene was just kind of petering out. That's not to say there isn't a fantastic live music scene here, but it seemed like it was transitioning to a different sound and a different person that went to the clubs to watch music. And the bands that were kind of coming out, the bands that were being listened to were not, they were either ridiculously over the top edgy bands, or they were very kind of eclectic, melodic, very transient music, I guess you could say, right? And so those were kind of the bands that were really, the clubs were really pushing, and we just fell in the middle and never really seemed to get that footing.
What kind of shows are you guys playing, Kris, with Firing at the Sky? Were you doing like double bills and that kind of stuff, or? Yeah,
we were doing double bills. Every so often a triple bill. So we're doing, the Amigos and O'Brien's and bouncing around, Capitol and all those places, right? And some nights we had absolutely fantastic crowds. It was packed, great energy, great time. And then other nights just absolutely silent. And it seemed like that was plaguing everybody in Saskatoon, right? It was really tough. From what I've seen, it's really tough to keep for a band to be able to regularly draw every single time that they play, because I guess that live music, to me, seems like it's being taken for granted quite significantly in the last 3-4 years, right?
you folded Firing at the Sky up, or it's on hiatus, never say never, like you might come back at some point, and you've gone on to do your one-man show. That must have been, I've thought about that myself, that must have been a difficult, or maybe not difficult, but what was the transition like for you to all of a sudden not have three guys on stage to jam with, to all of a sudden do you just by yourself, you know?
Yeah, it's a very bizarre thing. I can honestly say I had a lot of nerves when I first started doing it. There, like you say, when you don't have anybody to turn to and talk to, or have a dynamic with on stage, and a conversation, have somebody else jump up on a mic to give you a second to tune. When you don't have somebody there, it's a very lonely feeling, and at the same time, it's all on you. So you can't make a mistake, you can't break a string, you can't take a pause, because it's all you. So it was very strange. It was very strange for me when I first started doing it. And the buddy of mine, Travis Blanchard, just kind of started pushing me, saying, "Hey, well, why don't you, if you're not doing anything, why don't you just grab an acoustic guitar and come out, bring a half hour worth of songs and come play the show with me." And he kept pushing me to do it. And then, I really did enjoy it. I had a great time coming up there by myself. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. And I got used to it to some degree. So just started doing that, and I wanted to keep my chops up. It's the big thing. With the band was on hiatus, and so I wanted to keep singing and keep playing, and just kind of not at least disappear for a year or two and then show back up again, try to bring some other new band to the game again, right? So if it didn't find its way back on, so are you doing any of your original stuff, or is that all covers now? When you're doing your one man show? Well, the other thing too is that I'm doing it now more to make some money for myself too on the side, right? Because as you know, I've got 4 kids, so trying to keep the lights on and the bills paid is a bit of a balancing act for me too. So you start kind of taking gigs to get paid, and pretty soon you're kind of the slave to what the venue wants to see, right? And what the people are there for, and you want to keep them engaged. And so I don't really push too much of my original material, just to kind of keep that window open and keep things going, right? It's actually really quite smart, because I'm just thinking I drag my 6-piece band around, and we all make nothing, or we got to pay the club when we're done, So a one-man show would definitely make good sense in regards to that. You could actually still make a couple of dollars, and it seems to me like Saskatoon, there's more places than ever now to play a single or a duo type of a show, right? Would you agree? Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's space is the biggest issue, right? Space, and a sound guy and a sound board, and having a big stage. You're taking up all that space and all that money for a club to put on a show. And so when you're a single guy or a duo going out and playing places, there's very little overhead for these clubs and these places to put it on. And if they have the space for a band, they'll usually do it, but then they have to have a sound guy and put all that money into kind of promoting the show and everything. When you're just one guy, you can go in the corner and set up, and you can play pretty much anywhere.
And I think one of the other things that I noticed about your doing the solo stuff, I think it's changed your stagecraft a little bit, because I know that with Firing at the Sky, you weren't really a talker. We weren't into as much of the audience engagement stuff, and thankfully you had Nathan Saggs on board, who was very, very good at that, right? He wants to be talking to the audience, and he's vocal, and he's energetic, and he's really good. So you were able to lean on him a little bit with that. But now with your solo stuff, I find that your personality comes through a lot more, and it's more engaging, and it feels like a more personal show when I watch you now from back then. So do you think that sort of forced your hand to work out how to be a little bit more engaged with an audience, or?
It's funny you bring that up, because back in the day, I was a talker pretty significantly on the mic. So in the Morley Sound days,
right.
But it was always weird to me, because in the Morley Sound days, it was very high energy, and so doing a high energy project like that, it feels very natural to speak. It feels very natural to get up to the mic and say, "How's everybody doing? Let's have a great time here tonight." You just kind of bring this vocal attack at everybody, and it's got a really interesting, when you tone it down and you're doing something mellower, it's really hard to find something to say when you're not trying to amp people up on that same level, right? Metal just very much has this raucousy, aggressive vibe to it that when you go to speak, it doesn't translate the same way. So it always felt very weird to me to get up to the mic, playing in Firing at the Sky, even doing my acoustic stuff, because it's not the same conversation.
But you enjoy that though, and especially with the solo stuff, because it's a little bit more intimate, because you're not playing usually on a big stage like miles away from people. Do you enjoy that sort of more that closeness that you have with your audience, because you can gauge their reaction really, really well, right?
Yeah, I definitely enjoy the conversations that I have with people. It's definitely a lot more engaging personally and more intimate. But at the same token, it's still really hard to have to speak on the mic for me in that setting. I mean, it's just strange to me to speak because it's just it's me and my guitar, and I'm singing and I'm putting the song out there, and then it's like when it's finished, I'm like, am I a radio DJ now? It's like coming up next. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like I never know kind of what to say. Yeah. You know, hey, do you like that one? Well, you're gonna love this one. You know, like it's like, what do you, but how do you have that conversation? And I always feel weird about singling people out too. So I mean, if you're not talking to someone, you're talking at them, right? And when you're talking at them, then you're kind of putting people on the spot, right? And it's so. I've always had a hard time with that, because it just doesn't feel really sincere to have a conversation on the mic towards a group of people.
But that leads into sort of what you've been doing since we became locked down with the COVID situation, and playing these sort of live streamed at home concerts. So that changes that dynamic yet again, right? So I know that Randy would say this too, with the style of music that Randy plays and the stuff that you're doing now, it really is designed to get people engaged, get people dancing or moving, and you want to see that. So not having an audience and just playing into a camera. I mean, obviously your lovely assistant and wife Lisa is always there cheering you on, but that changes that dynamic again. So I was kind of wondering how you've been finding that, because I know the three I think you've done so far have been well received. So I just wondered if you talk a little bit about what the difference in energy is like, and how you managed to work through that.
Well, I'm absolutely loving it. I mean, to me, it's even better than playing at the clubs. I'm honestly not missing it like I thought I would, because I'm still having that interaction with people. I'm still having, there's still people watching. There's still people enjoying the music, which is really what it's all about first and foremost. So I'm not missing that portion of things. And then being like the first time I did it was definitely, it was weird, like speaking into camera, which very much just like right now, right? That's what I'm doing, speaking into a phone, right? But I love it. I mean, the stream wise, I love it because I mean, there's no setup, there's no, everything is all ready to go. Just getting the camera stuff worked out and working out my set list for the week and taking people's suggestions. And I'm engaging with them all week before I even played the show, right? People are sending me comments and suggestions and ideas. And so I basically have a good idea of what my audience is going to be like before I even get started. So then it feels a lot more natural to get on the mic and have a conversation and look at the comments and look at who's there and say, hey, how's it going? Nice to see you, and it's very intimate, very personal. And I know people are there because they want to be there on every level.
And so with the live show too, I know that, with the solo show too, not only are you playing acoustic and playing solo, you've also sort of developed this new skill where you're putting together these backing tracks for yourself, and you've got your harmony pedal, and so that's taken you in a different direction. You must have had a ton of fun doing that, laying down bass licks and sequencing drums and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's something I had a Topher Mills here in town. He came up to me once and he said, you know what makes really good money and what's really good, opens up your gig potential is doing corporate gigs, he said, right? And so he said, have you ever thought about using backing tracks? And I said, no, I haven't. I said, in the past, my dad and I toyed with it a little bit here and there, right? So he used to have like a bass pedal, or he used to have a drum machine, and him and I would just play over this drum machine, right? And so I kind of started to think about it. He suggested to me, Topher had said, go to karaoke.com and you pay like $2 a song and you upload it and you basically go to these corporate gigs and play these songs with a backing track, and they're alterable so you can remove whatever instrument you want from the overall package that they present to you. And once I kind of poked my head onto the site, looked at it and went, it's just too karaoke, you know, and that's literally karaoke.com, right? So I was just like, it's not a creative thing, man. I'm not being creative. And so I thought, well, maybe I should try doing something where I'm creating my own background track. So I did a little digging online and found the Digitech Trio Plus. It's got a drum machine built right into it with a looper and a bass player, right? So you basically plug into it, you play the rhythm, and then it senses what chords you're playing and picks a bass line, so follows the root notes that you're playing, and then it plays what it thinks that you want for drums, and then you can just dial in the style, the genre of what you're playing to that, and whatever kind of feels closest to the song you're working with, you stay with that, right? And so that's where I kind of started to fool around. And then, of course, I'd put with the looper, I would add some background stuff for some little melody stuff or little harmony lines or whatever, and pulled that all together. And I was already using a harmony pedal for vocals when I started doing the acoustic thing. So now it's a one-man band. You've got every instrument, the full package going all at once. So it was a lot of fun. Like you said, you mentioned it would be fun. It's fun. And it's not as time consuming. I didn't want to be that guy that's, you know, going into the studio, basically like setting myself up on Logic and recording every single track and mixing it and then bumping it all down and taking it with me. That just seemed like too time consuming and too a little too canned. So this has still, like, it's not really, really, really tight. It still has that live performance feel to it. Yet you still have a full band.
I was going to ask you, Kris, what's your go-to rig for if you're playing a rock show, like a Firing at the Sky show? What do you play? You play a Strat or a Les Paul, or what do you?
I've been doing PRSs, so that's primarily what I have. I have an old Washburn and then a couple of PRSs that I run, and then I have an orange 4x as well as a Hughes and Kettner head. I moved away. I had the orange rock reverb that I had initially started with, and I love the sound of it. But the Hughes and Kettner, I like to have control with a MIDI foot pedal, so that I'm able to dial in effects if I want to. And so the Hughes and Kettner had it all built in, so I just upgraded to that in the last couple of years.
And for acoustic, what are you playing? What type of acoustic are you playing live?
I'm playing both the Taylor and Attack.
I was going to ask you, what do you think the advantage is or disadvantage of being from Saskatchewan, living here, and promoting music? Do you think because we're a little island stuck out in the prairie, we're limited, or is there any advantage? What do you think about that?
Honestly, I think it's an advantage. So my brother's been playing out in Vancouver for 30 years now. He's been out there, and he's had some great success out there, joining in as a session musician, finding his way onto tours, finding his way with big bands. But at the same token, he had already kind of built up his own personal. He had been signed to Warner Brothers Records for a couple of years, and so he kind of was rubbing elbows on tours and meeting a lot of industry people and all that. And so now that he's kind of dialed away from all that, he doesn't find there's a lot of opportunity for him to be as recognized and as out there as he would want to be, right? And for me, like here at Saskatchewan, they just want music all the time here. I mean, there's so many opportunities here, and people are so raw about local around here as far as promoting and pushing and helping their local artists out here that, I mean, I've said it to him forever. I said, if you moved from Vancouver and came down here, I think you'd have great success here, just because people, I think, genuinely like to discover their music. And to me, you don't discover music from Toronto, you don't discover music from Vancouver, because it's pretty much, if it's good, it's right in your face. Whereas the rest of the world, they may not be turning their eye towards Saskatoon to look for the music. So when that music pops up and they go, wow, I love that. What is that? Where are these guys from? I think it gives a little extra allure that they've discovered something, because it's not in a typical big market.
Do you think that there is an overarching Saskatchewan sound? I
can honestly say, like, if you look when Sean Rowe and Wide Mouth Mason got going, there were a lot of guys that came out that had very much fell in love with Wide Mouth Mason, and so the Josh Palmer and Jordan Cook and all those guys, they seemed to really latch on to the success that Wide Mouth Mason had, and they seemed to emulate quite a bit Sean's style for quite some time. And then, of course, they branched out and got bigger and did, got more out there and did bigger things with themselves. But I felt like that Wide Mouth set the trend for that style of music. And we very much started to have a lot of blues, rock, energy projects coming out of here. And that was kind of our face for a while, was that kind of music, right? So I think every city is like that, right? I think they see a success from a band and they get really excited by that genre, and they kind of, you'll see a lot of I don't want to say copycats or carbon copies, because I wouldn't say any of those guys that I named are carbon copies at all. They just kind of emulated the success and grabbed onto that. I don't know, it's like they saw something fantastic happening and wanted to be part of it, right? So they kind of latched onto that and got excited by it, and then of course found their own sound within that. And I think you see that in a lot of major cities, is that they have some success there with a band or a couple of bands come out, and a lot of other guys want to find that same excitement and run with it, right?
Yeah.
So which metal bands are you listening to then? Who are you listening to right now?
Right now, I'm absolutely loving. So Periphery is one of my all-time favorites. Super heavy band out of the Midwest in the U.S. And I mean, there's been so many bands that'll kind of perk my head up. So I like Breaking Benjamin. I've been listening a lot to all these kind of different new bands that kind of pop out from these heavy centers, right? Where all these new styles, like the technical guys, where I love the Protest the Heroes and the Necrophagist, and a lot of those heavy bands are really exciting to me, just because they bring something new to the table. That's what I'm always looking for, is somebody that's bringing something new to the table that is kind of hybriding several styles together. And so then you're getting a bit of every world mixed in.
So with, as we already said, like Firing at the Sky is on hiatus indefinitely. You're having a lot of success with your solo shows. And I just wanted to ask you, what other projects do you have in the works? And can we expect an album of the songs you've been writing for your solo shows? So, Daddy's Home, Pulling Hair, any of those tracks that we played live. What are you thinking? What's the next direction for Kris Klyne?
I've kind of been a little all over the map lately, just because some opportunities have presented themselves. Can't really talk about yet, but there's been basically I've been writing twofold. So I've been doing my own acoustic stuff that I can actually bring live out there every single day. So like you said, Daddy's Home, Pulling Hair. I've written probably about I want to say about 10 of that type of song, 10, 11 songs that I can bring out in that capacity. And then at the same token, I've been writing a little bit edgier stuff as well, full band rock stuff that I've just been, I'll either hire a session drummer to play it. Obviously, you and Randy came out and played on the one song on Solidarity for me, which was hugely appreciated. That kind of stuff is where I kind of put that in my side. So I'd like to start a band again. Right now, I don't see it happening in the short term, but I'm always looking to try to get a project going. Maybe in the next year or two. I have small children at home right now, so time is just really eating up for me. So it's basically doing acoustic shows. So for me to be able to be creative and do my own original material, that's the only kind of setting that I have currently. But in the next, I'd like to have a full project the next year, and so I've been writing some just a little bit edgier stuff, and I don't mean metal or hard rock edgier. I mean edgier as in, I guess it's a like heavier blues, heavier rock, where it's driving. Yeah, I've been enjoying writing that kind of stuff. I'm always trying to challenge myself as to what I can write. So this is the first time I've written this light that's still rock and still distorted guitars. And then this is also the first time I've written country songs and pop songs, and I played that in the acoustic setting. So for me, it's always kind of challenging myself to see what I can do.
Lenny Kravitz said it 20 plus years ago that rock and roll is dead. So that's the question. Do you think rock and roll is dead?
It's a tough one to answer. I don't think the spirit of rock is dead. I don't think that live shows and live music is dead per se, but it is certainly being challenged by the at-home availability of music, right? So artists aren't able to make the revenue that they were able to make releasing recordings, putting them out there and make millions so that they could then support that music. Instead, going out and supporting that music is what's supporting them, and the recording of it is putting them in the hole. Being able, they're beholden to either the record company that they're working with, or they're creating it in their own creative way, right? And releasing it, and then hoping that they can make back their money on the album, investment that they put out, right? So basically doing it, investing in themselves, going out there, and then hoping that they can stay afloat. Now there's so much new out there, and people are able to record to themselves at home and just put out music. They're having a hard time being focused to any one thing. They have so much choice that I don't think you'll see that same kind of musician being able to be a rock star, right? And then you couple it with our new social dynamic where now, you can't have that sex, drugs, and rock and roll attitude anymore, right? You have to be somewhat socially responsible. There's no more Motley Crues that are ever going to come out and be those guys. You know what I mean? Even the Andrew WKs of the world. I mean, they're designated now to talking about party this and party that, and not really defining what a party is anymore in fear of getting in trouble. You know what I mean? So you really have to watch what you're doing and watch what you're saying. So how do you be that no holds barred rock band that just comes up, kicks you in the teeth, and at the same token, be socially responsible and behaved, and because there's a real energy and an anarchy to rock music, which I don't think you're allowed to have anymore.
I would say now that the 16-year-old Randy and Kris's would get themselves a MacBook Pro and Logic or whatever, and that's the new guitar. I would argue that. Do you agree? Yeah.
You have to be able to record your own stuff, put it out there, and push it yourself, and try to get as creative as possible with that. And there's so much work that's going into that you're at the point where, like, if you there's so many things you have to focus on. You have to focus on your marketing. You have to focus on your recording. You have to do it, find a fiscal way to be able to put that investment in yourself, and at the same time push yourself and live. How do you do that? How do you kind of juggle all of that at the same time while competing against millions and millions of other people that are all want that spotlight too, right? So.
And you have to be able to do everything, like you're saying. You have to be your own marketing guy. You got to be your own recording engineer, your own songwriter, your own video producer, your own everything. You got to do it all now, right?
That's right. Yeah. So to me, the way we define rock is dead. The way we defined it when we were younger, for sure, is dead. Is rock itself dead? No, I wouldn't say it, but it's certainly not the most popular genre anymore. And I don't know that whether the kids will ever pick it back up. I'm sure they will. Just like anything, trends are circular, right? They're cyclical. They come around over and over and over. So, in 10, 15 years, maybe we have another big resurgence, and all of a sudden rock and roll is the most important thing to everybody's ears again. But
so we're gonna finish up, Kris. I know your time is precious. So we always finish with our quick fire questions. So try not to overthink them. Just give me your answers as quick as you can. Okay, number one, the Stones or the Beatles?
Beatles, absolutely Beatles, all the way. Never got the hype on the Stones. Fantastic band, but never got the hype.
Two, favorite thing in your closet right now?
You know what? My twisted wig, hoodie, and shirt. I absolutely love the stuff that they hooked me up with. That it was a sponsorship that they hooked me up with a little bit of swag, and I love it.
Cool. Okay, number three. What song do you wish you'd written?
I would say Clutch. I would say definitely that genre. I would have loved to have gone back in a time machine and heard that just once. That, to me, anything Clutch, but specifically the Blast Tyrant album.
So a reciprocal question then. What song do you wish you hadn't written?
What song I wish I hadn't written? You know what? I would say Control off of my Morley Sound album. Topically, it's pretty risque. And my kids absolutely love that album, and me and my wife immediately reach for the skip button whenever it pops up. It's like, we don't want them to hear we don't want them to hear that one. So
okay, number five, sandals or flip flops?
Oh, I would say, see, that's so in the moment, right? So like if it's you're out into your backyard, it's flip flops all the way, right? But if you're actually going somewhere, it's sandals.
Okay.
Nice.
Best piece of advice you've received from a musician?
Be yourself and live in the moment, right? So I can honestly say I've been guilty a lot of the time in my life of not really enjoying the moment, of being too wrapped up in worrying about things, worrying about how it's going to go off, worrying about my gear, worrying that the show will be packed with people, or that I'll be able to do what I need to do and come across what I want to come across with. And I think it's super important that people just be in the moment and live in that moment and do the best they possibly can.
Okay, number 7. This one might take a while with you. Knowing you well, what's your favorite beer right now?
Oh yeah, I figured that question was coming. My favorite beer, I mean, it's such a tough one to hammer down. Honestly, the local stuff that we're doing around here is absolutely amazing. I love personally the Rebellion Hazy IPA. So if I was to reach onto the shelf for something right now, it's going to be either the Blackbridge New England or the Rebellion Hazy all the way from a shelf perspective. But I absolutely adore Almanac. Everything at Almanac in California. Oh my God, everything. Like that would be, if I was presented, the beer closet of all beer closets and told, go in there and take something with you. If there was Almanac there, that would be the first thing I'd grab.
The best band or artist you've ever seen live?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say Steve Vai from a guitar standpoint. So if you're talking to guitarist, Steve Vai would be the best that I've ever seen. As far as a vocalist, Chris Cornell, when I saw his acoustic set, absolutely engaging as can be as a frontman, and his vocals, wow, just absolutely wow. Gwar is the craziest thing ever to be part of. Like, I will never forget that. That to me, that's if somebody said you have to wipe from your memory every single show you've ever seen in your life except one, Gwar at Riley's. Gwar at Riley's has to stay in my brain forever, because I can honestly say I have never in my life been at a show where my jaw hit the floor so many times within a set, or I had to just kind of like I was aghast at my own response to it, because I would literally say to myself, your jaw is still open, close it, or stop laughing at the ludicrous behavior that's going on. It just kept going back and forth from jaw open to laughing. Like, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. So the one guy comes out, you've seen, a RoboCop movie, the first RoboCop movie, well, I don't know what it's called, the T-1000 or whatever, that big two-legged robot that comes out. The guy comes out in one of those robot costumes, right? And it comes out as his face. The thing is 8 feet tall, and it's got to be 8 feet wide. And where they hit it, when this guy comes up, it's got Ronald Reagan's head on that massive robot brain, and it comes up. I am the Reaganator. It comes out on stage, and you're like, where did they hide that thing? How did you guys get that out onto the stage without anybody seeing it coming? It just all of a sudden, boom, there it was. And they had these massive, you remember on the Return of the Jedi and the skiff scene where they have those big guns pointed down at the skiff and they're firing from the main barge? They had these big, massive guns in Riley's. Like, these things were 8 feet long, and they had the two handle, and they were water-propelled cannons, basically. And they had one at each side of the stage, and they literally just pointed down at the crowd and just go, with water, blasting everybody with colored water. They used to use, like, corn syrup, like fake blood, but it was too much of a mess. The clubs wouldn't have it anymore, so they just did colored water, and they would just blast people with this as the show was going on. And that was the greatest finale I've ever seen in the show. Is literally, it was just like, we're Gwar, fuck off, and they just pointed both of the guns down on the crowd and put them on full blast. Everybody ran away, like the whole crowd just dispersed. And by the time that the people turned around and wiped their eyes clean, the band was gone and the stage was off. It was the absolute most fantastic ending to a show I've ever seen.
Wow.
It was a spectacle like nobody's business.
So number 9, describe your teenage self in 3 words.
My teenage self in 3 words: rebellious, stubborn, and determined.
Who would you most like to perform with, given the opportunity? And that can be anyone living or dead.
Honestly, to this day, I'm still kicking myself that I didn't get the opportunity to play with Dimebag and Vinny. I had the opportunity and we had to pass on it. And I'm still kicking myself to this day. So we had been asked if we could do the after party for Pantera. And at the time, our drummer he had his honeymoon plan for that time. So we couldn't take the show. And so then Dimebag and Vinny showed up to the after party and got on stage with the band and played. And we used to do Pantera songs regularly. So I would have gotten the opportunity to play Pantera with Pantera.
Do you have any more live streams coming up? Is there anything going on that we can tell people about right away?
Toying with the idea of doing another one this weekend, but haven't made a firm plan to quite yet. Otherwise, I've got some opportunities that have kind of come up for some songs that I have that I'm going to probably release a single or maybe 2 singles of my own. And there might be some new music coming for a few other projects. I'm trying to kind of pull it all together here. So I've got a lot of songs in the can that haven't been released, to put it that way. And I think it's about time, especially with everybody home and kind of yearning for something to do. Now might be the time to kind of bring these songs out and give people a listen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out. I know that, again, we're all sort of going squirrely inside, and I know that you're with 4 kids. That's a busy life you have. So we really, really appreciate you taking some time out to chat with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.